Hey friends. So, been working, wrestling, whatever you want to call it, with something the past couple of days. As I've mentioned in my last week or so of posts, we're doing this raw vegan cleanse, my wife and I are, and it's a time when I had almost sort of forgotten how much information, how much insight comes through when you start to deeply cleanse your body. I'm cleansing my consciousness. I can feel that happening. And so one of the upshots of that, one of the things that one of the components of that is getting lessons, getting reflections from life. So, for example, I've been working with my Tony Robbins coach for several weeks now, looking at what's my next step, where's the movement, where's the income going to come from, what am I really building towards? Because I've had a period where I've had a period now for a while where I felt like I was coming out of a flurry of projects and in a number of ways a phase of my life. And coming out of that has really put me in a place where I've sometimes wondered, what is my purpose? What am I doing here? And I've had such powerful compulsions, such powerful impulses over the past several years, many years. I've had some really powerful forces, kind of from within and without, but primarily from within, that created momentum in my life, that created direction, but they haven't always locked me into a deeper purpose in a way that stayed constant. And I think what showed up for me yesterday, okay, I had to go up to Santa Fe, so I had a drive, and I was listening to my audiobook, this really incredible book called Erzählende Affen. It's a book about how narrative shapes our meaning making. I've been down a bit of a rabbit hole. I listened to another book by Leo Lowenthal that was quoted in Erzählende Affen, and I have had a number of kind of interesting perspectives thrown at me by my reading recently, particularly having to do with how Americans create meaning and how American culture. There's this whole part in the book about how American culture is almost a culture of fantasy. They go back historically to look at like the kinds of advertisements that were used to get people to move to the New World. And there was the pioneer spirit of America was marketed to people in England, so that they would to kind of urge us to come over here. And so one of the sort of one of those sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek, although really also quite serious descriptions of American culture or American people, is that Americans are the descendants of people who were particularly susceptible to advertising, because the notion of our country had to be advertised, had to be marketed to us, so that we would embrace it, so that we would come over here and create it. Anyway, that's one small detail on a whole kind of smorgasbord of ideas that's been coming up for me recently about culture and the United States. And so what came out of that yesterday was this sense that I'm fascinated by this. I'm endless, for whatever reason, I'm endlessly fascinated by this. And it feels like, I was thinking yesterday in the car, what am I gonna do with this knowledge? This feels like knowledge that is highly relevant to the cultural moment, right? And I'm stitching things together from a variety of sources, and I'm not being very clear or exhaustive here. But that idea of America as a place, there's a whole bit about Disneyland and how Disneyland is this sort of hyper. It's like America on steroids, because it's this place where very directly fantasy is sort of elevated to the highest possible sphere. Disneyland is a fantasy land. This is not just the authors of this book. This was sort of taken from other writers who've commented on the fact that Disneyland is in some ways just like the natural, like, ultimate expression of America in this creation of a fictitious world that we know is fictitious, but that still compels us. That still has the sway of reality over us. And our ability to distinguish as a culture between fact and fiction goes way beyond Disneyland, right? That's something that when I was listening to them describe America in this way, I thought to myself, yeah, that sounds about right. And if we look at what we one of the things we produce most successfully is entertainment platforms, entertainment content. We are spectacular at that. We have the world's greatest entertainment industry. And entertainment is the creation of illusion. It's the creation of stories. So there's this sort of like way in which, if it is indeed the case that our culture is based on a sort of fictionalized version or a fantasy version of the ongoing creation of a fantasy version of life, it's no surprise that we would be really great at creating stories that compel and entertain. And then my mind went to Sadhguru, who talks about, and many other mystics, who talk about, if you judge what's possible based on the experiences of your past, then you will be restricted. You'll be limited. You won't be free. Because just because something hasn't happened before doesn't mean it can't happen in the next instant or tomorrow. We just need to know what we're trying to create. And so not being limited by what is one of the great gifts of a culture that is used to inventing, reinventing, and inventing from the ground up the narratives that define our reality. We don't have a problem redefining our reality. We see this sometimes played out in very problematic ways. If we have, if all of a sudden we start to define our reality via alternative facts, this starts to be a societal schism. But that power, and of course there's the danger of like just out and out delusion, creating fictional versions of reality that are not true, that are not more valuable or more profound or more enlightening than existing narratives. They're just different. And so, but where do you put the guardrails for a culture like that? Where do you put the guardrails for that approach to perceiving and creating reality? Well, in a tradition like Sadhguru's, there would be a tradition. There would be practices, and there would be energetic experiences, physical, energetic, emotional, psychological experiences that are cultivated, practices to create a certain kind of container for what the mind's creative power then produces. And there's of course a fair amount of emphasis on getting beyond just the individual's desires and whims, because creating a reality based on the whim of individual egos is problematic, and I think we see that. I think we demonstrate that. So I know I'm going on about this, and I'm basically allowing myself to follow the train of thought that I started down yesterday. But what struck me out of all of this was actually something more close to home about my search for what my next steps are. What am I building towards? What is my purpose here, really? And I recognize that those ideas and thinking in this way and looking at reality and discerning, expressing, my post yesterday was about an enthusiasm to express discovery. That's what I feel when I study like this. The enthusiasm to express discovery comes out most directly for me through writing. So I think I'm a writer. That's what my raw vegan cleanse is teaching me. Maybe even more than I am a musician. Although, why I feel the need to label that, I'm not sure, but maybe having a sense of priorities in my life, or having a sense of where is my expression most powerful, most relevant, most necessary, is helpful in orienting my own next steps, my own defining my own purpose, because that's an important thing for me right now. for watching, folks. Appreciate you. Have a great day. I'll see you soon.